Hello and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your host, and this is a show that we do on Iconic Production where we talk about games, game design, thoughts on gaming, all with a game designer's view. And we're in this middle of this series. We started with fantasy. We're in the middle of or at the start of our journey through science fiction, looking at the genre, the tropes, the games that best replicate it. And today we're looking at the last part of Cyberpunk. How do we replicate that at the table with our gamers? So, hello to John Doom and to Mr. Bob Crumb. It's always good to see both of you in here. Bob, will have to get you on that next Savage Rifts game that we do because it was a ton of fun. Rook with the sub bomb. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for your generosity as always. So, and to everyone who just subscribed, thank you. So, we're going to talk about how do we replicate cyberpunk at the table. And I will be honest, this is a tough genre for me to replicate at the table. For some strange reason, the nihilism of cosmic horror, I don't mind. But the nihilistic consumerism of cyberpunk really just crushes my soul. And that's what you need to do as a cyberpunk GM, is just crush the souls of your players. Well, I guess that's it. No. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper than that, because here's the thing. Cyberpunk is a genre that is built around this idea that the megacorps control everything. And even when you think you're on the outside, that you have somehow rebelled, that the punk is strong with this one. That in actuality, you're just another cog in the machine, right? The idea behind Shadowrun is that the megacorps are so vast and so powerful that you as runners are sort of the rebels, the fly in the ointment. And don't we all want that? Don't we all want to feel like we're the rebels, we're the underdogs, and by gods, we're going to win? And then you find out that all the megacorps have a budget for hiring runners. And they do it basically to provide a layer of anonymity that they are using against their corporate enemies. And you find out that as a runner, you're not punk. You're just providing the corp with another service, and that service is you. Right? That's one of the key mindsets to keep in mind in Cyberpunk. This desire for rebellion, but the prevailing technology that gives you an almost Orwellian Big Brother effect. And you want to bounce between these two poles. You want to give your characters victories. They get the run, they get the money, they save the scientist. They save the scientist's daughter. They recover the data. They take out that one bad exec at the other company. And then you need to hit them later with the fact that all of that was part of a larger, grander scheme by corporations who have think tanks and AIs that are so far above them, beyond what the players can do, that their victory was just third quarter's target goal. So, I do feel like that's oppressive, and that's sort of crushing in a way. And one of the things to remember is that with Cyberpunk, you need to focus on the small victories. It's almost like I feel like there's a connection between how I run Cyberpunk and how I run Cosmic Horror. In Call of Cthulhu, you're not going to kill Cthulhu. In fact, you're not going to stop the Elder Gods from awakening and eventually destroying the Earth and transforming it into a hellish landscape suitable only for their servitors. But maybe you can buy another generation, another year, another day. That your sacrifice allows whole generations of people to be born, to live, and to die blissfully living in their ignorance. And so in Cyberpunk, those are the kind of victories we want to show and celebrate for our players. You're not going to take down a megacorp. But you know what? You may be able to save the shelter on 3rd Street. You're not going to assassinate the head of a corporation, but maybe you can clear that gang out of your local neighborhood. Right? You want to focus on how the real punk in Cyberpunk for me is not that the players are rebels and outside of the system, but they are very much in a Robin Hood situation, siphoning what resources they can by hurting the corporations and channeling them into, hopefully, altruistic games. Now, granted, you may have a team of runners who are in it only for themselves. All they want to do with their money is buy the best gear, upgrade to the best cyberware, have the slickest ride, have the best chrome. And you know what? That fits into our 2 other themes we want to talk about on how to replicate this at the table, which is, of course, the loss of humanity and the loss of consumption, right? When we are, or not the loss of consumption, the magnification of consumption. Yes, Rook. So the focus here in Cyberpunk, I really think, is on a very specific location. Like, look at the old Shadowrun. Seattle was basically the only place they focused on. And in fact, you would actually get narrowed down even more into, like, the sprawls, right? You want something very personal and local. Cyberpunk, I think, is my personal opinion, shines best both in fiction, games, and in movies when it's focused on the personhood of the runners. The runners are set in a specific place. They have people they love. They have people they care about. These are what make for compelling stories in a cyberpunk story, because Cyberpunk is about the faceless corporations and the masses of humanity. You need to be able to zoom in and focus on the faces of the characters sitting around the table. Oh, don't worry, we're gonna get to transhumanism. And there's some beautiful things that happen in transhumanism, and there's some very Gnostic things that happen in transhumanism. But that starts on Thursday. So, Bob, it does feel like you can be successful. And again, you can be successful in cosmic horror. Like, look at the Dunwich horror. I think Chaosium did a brilliant decision by replacing the Call of Cthulhu with the Dunwich horror in their new versions of the rulebook, because Dunwich horror is much closer to what a game of Call of Cthulhu is like. In Call of Cthulhu, we're reading the stories of people who have already gone insane. In the Dunwich horror, we're following an investigator trying to prevent the Dunwich horror from escaping Dunwich. And it costs them sanity, and it costs them lives, but they succeed. It's not saying that Yog-Sothoth is never going to have another offspring. It's not saying that the Elder Gods are defeated. But the professor, is it Professor Armitage? He successfully saves Dunwich, at least for the day. So if you have this group of technophiles, and even if you don't, even if you have people who are just buying into the base assumptions of Cyberpunk, you need to keep them hungry and you need to keep them chasing, because consumption is part of Cyberpunk. I was talking with Gabe, who plays in our Tord game, and we kind of came to the conclusion that or maybe we discussed it in the last stream, right? The amount of gear creep and sheer tables of gear that exist in a Cyberpunk core rulebook and continually gets knocked forward with each new book plays into the consumerism of Cyberpunk. You want your players to continually be chasing just enough money to get their next gear fix. Show off the gear to your players. If they think they're soda, state of the art, give them an opponent who has bleeding edge technology. You think you're on the razor's edge? Welcome to the bleeding edge. Give them just enough money or just enough promise. If you do this run, we'll hook you up with X, Y, and Z. Right? For the Street Sams in Shadowrun, part of the fun of playing that game is getting access to alpha, beta, and deltaware, more compact cyberware, so they can shove more material into their bodies. The Ares Predator is great, but the Ares Predator 4 is even better. Why not why not get ultrasound sights? Why not get razor wire or monofilament wire weapons? These are the things that reinforce the idea that you are dependent on the corporation for the very things you hate them for. And I think this helps reinforce that idea, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, about the consumerism of cyberpunk. One of the scenes in Altered Carbon that I think was probably the most purest cyberpunk that we got in any science fiction show recently. And I think it was the scene that upset most people. And when we were talking about it, my response was first day in cyberpunk is the scene where the detective goes to the sleeve shop. Altered Carbon straddles the line between transhumanism and cyberpunk, but I think they took a transhuman idea and brought it back to the cyberpunk, where all of the advertisements are about show these naked men and women with the lines, "Put your spouse in me, and then you'll be happy." That is the key component of cyberpunk. You want the players to realize they are the product. They are both the product and the consumer of the product. It is a cannibalistic Ouroborean experience. So how do we do this? Well, give them a lot of gear. Give better gear to the corporations. Make them chase after the corporate jobs to get the money and the gear that they want. Then, if they haven't picked up on this, use the lens of NPCs. The people that they love, wondering if they sold out. Certain fixers won't work with them anymore because you're really too deep in the pockets of the corpse. Yeah, you've got that new cyber arm. I heard that only Wayland Yutani gives those out to their top tier. I'm not working with you. How do I know you're not a corporate spy or corporate sellout? Worse, right? In the punk genre, being a sellout is the worst thing that can happen to somebody. Hit them in their reputation. That's where these things happen. And this feeds into the last key component, the loss of humanity. Show the players the road they're going down. If they're hitting up a ton of cyberware, show them the cyber zombie, the person who has no humanity left, who callously treats everyone. Reinforce, it's an easy thing to overlook, but most of these games have some sort of cyber psychosis rule. Reinforce it. You're removed from humanity because you're not entirely human anymore. Have small children. Do not underestimate the impact of a small child NPC screaming at the chromed out Street Sam and running away from them. Reinforce the fact that what they're doing, even if they have the best of intentions, is leading them down a path where they are literally losing their soul and their humanity and their ability to be empathetic towards each other. I think that's where the victories in Cyberpunk happen. When in the face of all of this, empathy and humanity and compassion come forward and lead to the little victories. The piano outlet, a smaller corp. I like that. And you are not a xenomorph yet. I'm glad to hear that, Rook. But on the day that you do burst from my chest with a top-hatted cane, I will consider that to be a good day to die, in the words of Lieutenant Orr. So, yes, welcome to the Harpsichord Enterprises, where the filament that binds us binds you. Rook, have a possibility for tonight's Torg game. So, that brings us to our look at Cyberpunk. If it felt depressing there at the end, it's because good Cyberpunk should provoke regret and this feeling of, hey, if we don't change something soon, this is where we could end up. I'm looking right at you, Nevada. You're offering extra state status to corporations if they move to Nevada. Do you want megacorps? Because this is how you get megacorps. So that brings us to an end of Cyberpunk. We're going to start our transhuman look on Thursday, which is a nearly overlapping Venn diagram with Cyberpunk, except for some key differences. So you'll hear a lot of, I don't want to say repeated information. I'm going to try and compare and contrast Cyberpunk and transhumanism. Great games to immediately start looking at would be things like Infinity and Eclipse Phase, and some other ones that we'll get into as we go forward from this. This is why we can't have nice things. Yeah, Bob, that's don't know what to tell you. Gibson and the guys at FASA outlined this path for us in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and who knew they would be Cassandra standing on the mountaintop, screaming to the world no, and everyone ignoring them. So guys, I will chat with all of you on Thursday for more Behind the Screens. Until then, check us out tonight on Torg Eternity. We're going to be the Diamond Armament Part 5 or 6. I can promise explosions and possibly robots tonight. And then on Thursday, we'll return with more Behind the Screen. We're going to continue our look at science fiction. We're going to do transhumanism, near science fiction, hard sci-fi, space opera, and science fantasy. So that should take us through the end of the year. There will be some other interesting announcements that we will bring up, including some for Iconic and some for Strange Owl. So keep tuned in here for Twitch. If you're following here on Twitch or on YouTube, thank you so much. Remember, we do have our giveaway. If we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we're going to be giving away an entire Kickstarter set of the Fading Suns books. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see all of you on Thursday. Have a good one.